The stars were silent when the message arrived. No one in the galaxy had expected it. A single call for help, weak and broken, came from a small world at the edge of the map. The message was not long. It said only one thing: "They are coming. Please help us." No name. No explanation. Only fear inside the voice. Across the core worlds, the great empires listened. They did not care. Small planets begged for help all the time. Old wars, pirate raids, falling governments, the strong never moved for the weak. It was not their way. But Earth was different. Humans had only recently entered the galactic stage. They were still called the newcomers by the elder races. Their fleets were small. Their colonies were young. They were not feared. Yet something inside their history made them answer calls others ignored. They were strange like that. When the broken message reached Earth's Deep Space Command, there was a moment of silence in the war room. The officers did not know who was calling. The location was a forgotten system, lost beyond trade routes. The risk was unknown. But one look passed between them, and the decision was made. "Send a relief team," the commander said. "Military escort?" asked another officer. "Send more than escort," the commander replied. "Send a task force. And keep it quiet." No one argued. While the other races kept watching, thinking nothing would happen, a human fleet began to move. It started small, a hospital ship, a carrier, and a few destroyers. But more ships joined. Freighters loaded with supplies. Engineers. Soldiers. Scientists. Volunteers. It was like a wave of motion in space. Even the elder races did not understand why humans would risk so much for a voice they did not know. Inside the ships, the crews whispered. What enemy could terrify a planet so much? Why had no one else answered? Was it a trap? No one knew. Yet still they went. On the flagship Resolute, Captain Mira Lane stood at the window, staring into the dark. She had fought pirates before. She had seen colonies burn. But this was different. This time there was no clear enemy. Only a plea. And somewhere deep inside her, a question burned. Who is they? The fleet crossed the edge of charted space. Navigation lights flickered on their hulls like cold stars. Communications stayed silent. Only the hum of engines and the quiet breathing of thousands of humans filled the ships. Then strange signs began to appear. The first was a drifting freighter with no crew. No life signs. Only claw marks on the hull, long and deep, as if some giant hand had scraped it. The second was a broken station orbiting a gas giant, its metal twisted like paper. The third was worse, a rescue beacon from a children's colony ship, but no children aboard. Fear began to grow. Even the soldiers stopped joking. At night, Captain Lane stood at the observation deck. The stars felt closer, heavier. Her second officer came to her side. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "maybe we should turn back." She looked at him. "We don't turn back," she said. "We're human." Word spread through the fleet. Supplies were stacked higher. Weapons loaded. Medics checked their kits twice. Every person felt the same heavy question. What waits for us at the edge? Finally the fleet reached the coordinates from the message. A small planet hung before them, blue and green but scarred. From orbit it looked alive, but the cities were dark. No power grids, no ships, no signals. Only ruins and empty roads. Sensors picked up movement on the surface, but it was strange, fast, and cold. Not human. Not anything known. "Is this the enemy?" someone whispered. Captain Lane gave the order to descend. Dropships fell through the thin clouds, engines hissing. Soldiers held their weapons tight. Medics clutched their packs. Engineers prayed their machines would work. The first landing zone was a silent square in the middle of a dead city. Buildings stood like teeth. Windows were shattered. A cold wind moved dust through the streets. No voices. No signs of survivors. Only shadows that seemed to slide away when looked at directly. A soldier spoke over comms, voice shaking. "We're not alone." Something moved at the edge of the square, tall, thin shapes with glimmering eyes. They did not walk. They floated, like smoke made solid. Their faces were hidden, but their gaze felt like knives. The soldiers raised their rifles. The shapes stopped. The air grew colder. A sound like metal scraping on bone filled the square. Then a voice came, not from mouths but inside every human head at once. It was slow, heavy, and full of hunger. "You came," it said. "We wondered if you would." The soldiers froze. Captain Lane's heart pounded. The shapes began to drift closer, silent except for that voice. On the flagship above, alarms started to scream. Sensors detected dozens, no, hundreds, of ships appearing at the edge of the system. Dark ships without heat, moving like predators. The fleet was surrounded. Back on the surface, the voice spoke again, colder than before. "You heard the plea," it said. "But you did not ask who sent it." And then the shapes struck. The shapes struck fast, like smoke turning into knives. Soldiers opened fire, their rifles flashing bright in the dark square. Bullets cut through the mist bodies but did not slow them. The air filled with a hiss, cold and sharp. Captain Mira Lane shouted orders. "Fall back. Form a circle." Her voice was steady but her heart was racing. She had seen battles before, but never enemies like this. The shapes pressed closer. They moved without sound, except for the voice inside the humans' heads. "Your kind comes to rescue," it whispered. "We feed on rescuers." One soldier fired a grenade. The explosion lit the ruins. For a moment the shapes broke apart like shattered glass, but then they flowed back together, reforming in seconds. On the flagship Resolute above the planet, alarms screamed louder. Commander Jiro on the bridge watched the sensors in horror. Hundreds of black ships now ringed the system like a closing jaw. They had no transponders. They radiated no heat. They looked like shadows shaped into vessels. "Contact Fleet Command," an officer asked. Jiro shook his head. Too late. No signals getting out. The dark ships were jamming everything. Down on the planet, the soldiers began pulling wounded back toward the dropships. Medics dragged people out of the mist while engineers tried to power up portable shields. The shield hum was weak, flickering like a dying light bulb. Mira Lane raised her pistol and fired into the nearest shape. This time the shot burned like fire. The thing recoiled, hissing. She realized her sidearm was loaded with plasma rounds. "Plasma hurts them," she shouted. "Switch ammo." Soldiers switched, firing bursts of blue-white heat. The shapes faltered but did not retreat. They floated back, circling like wolves, waiting for something. Then, from deeper inside the ruined city, a second signal began to pulse. Not a voice. A beacon. Short and sharp, like a heartbeat. The humans' radios caught it. It was coming from under the ground. Myra's second officer looked at her. "That must be the one who called for help. Or a trap," she said. But her eyes were already on the signal. She ordered half her squad to cover the retreat, the rest to follow her into the ruins. The dropships rose on their engines, hovering as the soldiers disappeared into a broken subway entrance. Inside, the tunnels smelled of rust and stone. Flickering lights showed scratched walls, claw marks deeper than a man's arm. The signal grew stronger. "Who are you?" Mira whispered into her radio. "We heard your message. We're here." A small, thin voice answered at last, a real voice, not in their heads. "You must hurry," it said. "They will not let you leave." Myra's team pushed deeper, stepping over bones and broken machines. Finally they reached a chamber lit by a faint blue glow. In the middle lay a figure curled up in a tangle of cables, a young alien child with pale skin and silver eyes. "It's a kid," one soldier said softly. The child looked up at Mira with terror. "I sent the call," it whispered. "I thought you would come." Who are they? Mira asked. The child trembled. They are the harvesters. They eat worlds. They took my people first. Then they sent me as bait. They promised if I called for help they would let me live. Myra's stomach turned cold. Bait. The ceiling above shook. Dust fell. Outside the tunnels, the voice of the shapes grew louder. You go deeper, it whispered in every human mind. Good. We follow. Mira scooped the child into her arms. We're leaving, she said. Her squad fought their way back up the tunnels. Shapes poured through cracks and holes, moving faster now, claws scraping the walls. Soldiers fired plasma until their barrels glowed red. One by one, they fell back toward the entrance. Outside, the dropships were still holding, their cannons blasting streams of white heat into the mist. The shield generators flickered and died. The square became a storm of light and shadow. Myra's team burst out of the subway with the child. Go! Go! She shouted. The dropships lowered ramps. Soldiers jumped aboard, covering each other. As the last human stepped up, a shape lunged and caught a soldier's leg. The soldier screamed. Mira fired point blank, burning the thing away. But the soldier's armor was cracked and frost had spread over his skin. Medics dragged him inside. The dropships blasted off, engines roaring, leaving the ruined city behind. Below, the shape swirled like a black sea, rising but not quite reaching. Above, the dark ships in orbit began to move. On the Resolute, Commander Jiro's face was pale. They're forming a net, he said. They want to stop us from leaving the system. Myra's voice came over comms, tight but calm. We have the survivor. We're coming up. Jiro glanced at the screen. And bringing the enemy with you. Outside the windows, the stars vanished behind the black ships. It felt like the galaxy itself was closing its eyes. Inside the med bay, the alien child clutched Myra's hand. You should not have come, it whispered. No one escapes the harvesters. Mira looked out the viewport at the encircling shadows. She felt the weight of thousands of human lives, the promise to answer a call for help, and the cold certainty of the trap closing around them. Then she gave her order, voice steady as steel. Prepare the fleet for breakout. We're not dying here. The engines roared. The humans turned their ships toward the darkness. And far away, on a channel no one else could hear, the harvesters spoke once more. Let them run, the voice said. The hunt is sweeter when prey fights back. Engines thundered through the Resolute as the human fleet turned its bows toward the black ships. Red lights washed over the control decks. Soldiers strapped themselves in. Medics held the wounded tight. No one spoke above a whisper. Captain Mira Lane stood on the bridge, the alien child beside her. Outside, the harvester's ships drifted like a sea of shadows, closing the trap. The child's silver eyes were full of fear. They will not let you pass, the child whispered. Mira glanced at her crew. Then we make them. Commander Jiro leaned over the tactical map. They're forming 3 rings. If we hit the smallest gap at full speed, we might punch through. Mira shook her head. They'll close it before we reach it. We need a distraction. Below decks, engineers and soldiers rushed to load plasma torpedoes. Every weapon the fleet had was armed, even old experimental devices that had never been tested in combat. The air smelled like metal and sweat. On the flight deck, pilots climbed into small strike craft, fast, sharp-nosed fighters. Some kissed Lucky Charms. Some recorded short messages to families they might never see again. All of them knew the odds. Above the planet, the harvesters moved. The black ships no longer drifted. They unfolded like insects opening wings, dark panels stretching into claws. Strange lights flickered along their edges, colors no human eye had seen before. The void itself seemed to ripple around them. The alien child gripped Myra's sleeve. They eat light, it whispered. They drink engines. Your weapons will only feed them. Myra's eyes hardened. Everything dies, she said quietly. Even them. She gave the order. Launch fighters. Prepare the carriers. All ships at maximum burn. A deep vibration ran through the fleet as engines roared to life. Fighters screamed out of their bays, weaving through the void in tight formations. Their plasma trails cut blue scars across the black. The harvesters reacted instantly. Their ships did not fire normal weapons. Instead they released clouds of dark particles, swarms that moved like living smoke, reaching for the human fighters. One pilot swore over comms as his craft's controls went dead, the swarm eating through metal like acid. His ship spun and vanished into darkness. But other pilots broke through, slashing at the swarms with plasma bursts. Some of the dark clouds burned away under heat. Small victories, but enough to keep a path open for seconds at a time. On the Resolute, Jiro called out coordinates. We have a hole. It won't stay open long. Go, Mira ordered. The human fleet surged forward. Carriers, destroyers, hospital ships, all engines screaming. Plasma torpedoes fired in bright arcs, slamming into the nearest harvester vessels. For the first time the shadows flickered, their edges breaking apart. The humans roared over comms, a sound of hope and fury. Then the harvesters struck back. A beam of pure darkness lanced from one of the massive ships. Not light but the absence of it. It cut through a human destroyer like a knife through paper. The ship vanished, leaving only drifting wreckage and a scream on the radio. Another beam followed, hitting the hospital ship's shields. Sparks burst across its hull. Medics inside clung to their patients as gravity failed for a moment. But the ship held, limping forward under its own fire. Keep moving. Mira shouted. Do not stop. Inside her head, the voice of the harvesters returned, cold and slow. You fight. Good. We taste your fear. Mira ignored it. She looked at the alien child. Is there a weakness? The child hesitated, then whispered. Their cores are not ships. They are mouths. If you make them swallow fire, they burn. Myra's eyes lit with grim resolve. Jiro. New plan. Feed them. The fleet shifted formation. Instead of firing torpedoes directly, the humans aimed at the edges of the dark ships, drawing their attention. Fighters dove into impossible angles, baiting the swarms, making the harvesters open their mouths wider. Then the Resolute fired a single massive torpedo, a prototype plasma warhead meant for planetary defense. It streaked like a blue sun straight into the nearest harvester mouth. For an instant nothing happened. Then the mouth imploded. A shockwave rolled through space. The dark ship tore apart in silence, fragments glowing as they died. The swarm around it scattered like smoke in wind. The humans cheered. One of the monsters was dead. But victory came with a price. The harvesters roared in every mind at once, a sound like grinding stone. All remaining ships turned toward the humans at once, claws opening, beams charging. The alien child trembled. You hurt them, it said. Now they will not stop. Mira set her jaw. Good. Neither will we. Jiro looked at her. Captain, we're almost through the gap. One more push. Push, she said. Everything you've got. The fleet poured every last shot into the harvesters, blocking the escape lane. Fighters sacrificed themselves to clear the path, ramming into swarms, burning until nothing was left. The carriers bled energy but kept moving. The hospital ship trailed sparks but did not fall behind. The gap opened, a wound in the wall of shadows. Stars beyond it shone cold and distant. Freedom lay there, but only if they could reach it. Full burn, Mira ordered. Now. Engines flared white. The fleet leapt forward. The harvesters lunged, beams slashing, claws closing. For a heartbeat it seemed the darkness would swallow them whole. Then the Resolute and its fleet burst through the gap into open space. Alarms still blared, hulls still burned, but the trap was broken. Behind them the harvesters howled, their voices fading as the humans fled into faster-than-light jump. On the bridge, no one cheered. Too many had been lost. Too many still at risk. Mira looked at the alien child, who stared back with haunted eyes. "You are free," Mira said softly. The child shook its head. "No one is free. They will follow." Mira turned back to the stars ahead, her fists tight. She knew the child was right. The harvesters would come. The war had only begun. Space outside the viewport was streaked with stars. The human fleet had jumped far from the ruined system, but no one felt safe. Hulls were scarred. Engines smoked. Medics worked in silence over rows of wounded. The smell of burned metal clung to every corridor. Captain Mira Lane walked the length of the Resolute's bridge. Her crew avoided her eyes. They were tired and afraid. On the table before her floated a hollow of the enemy ships, black claws closing again and again. "They will follow," the alien child said softly from a corner seat. Its silver eyes glowed faint in the dim light. "They always follow. They do not forget prey." Commander Jiro leaned on the table, his face pale. "We can't fight them head-on again. Not with what we have left." Mira stared at the hollow. She knew he was right. But she also knew turning away would doom every world the harvesters touched next. "There has to be a way to hurt them more," she murmured. Down in the engine bay, engineers argued. Some wanted to shut down the jump drives and hide. Others wanted to keep moving, never staying in one place long enough for the harvesters to catch them. Voices rose and fell with fear. On the flight deck, pilots sat in silence, helmets at their feet. Many had lost friends in the breakout. No one made jokes anymore. Then a new signal appeared on the long-range scans. It was faint, like a heartbeat, coming from a dead nebula nearby. Not a harvester signal. Something else. Jiro frowned at the readout. "An old relay," he said. "Pre-galactic war tech. Could be a trap." Mira felt a flicker of something like hope. Or a chance. Plot a course. Hours later the fleet slid into the shadow of the nebula. Clouds of purple gas swirled around them, hiding their signatures. Lightning flashed deep inside. The alien child stared at the colors and whispered in its own language. At the center of the nebula they found it, a giant station made of cracked stone and metal, drifting without power. Symbols older than any known race lined its hull. A grave of an ancient civilization. Sensors showed no life, no energy. But deep inside, a core still pulsed faintly. "What is that?" Jiro asked. The child's eyes widened. "A forge," it said. "My people spoke of it. The ones who fought the harvesters first built weapons here. Weapons that could burn them." Myra's heart jumped. "Weapons." The child nodded slowly. "But the forge is dead. It has slept for 1,000 ages." Mira turned to Jiro. "Then we wake it." Teams in suits launched from the Resolute and drifted toward the station. They cut through an airlock crusted with ice. Inside, the halls were dark and silent. Statues of forgotten warriors lined the walls, faces eroded by time. Symbols glimmered faintly when touched. Deep in the core chamber, they found a machine the size of a tower, its heart still glowing. Cables like veins spread into the walls. When Mira stepped closer, the glow brightened, reacting to her presence. The child placed its small hand on the metal. The glow flared into blue fire. Symbols scrolled across the walls, unreadable to humans but clear to the child. "It speaks," the child whispered. "It asks who will bear the burden." Mira did not hesitate. "Tell it humanity will." The chamber trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling. Energy rippled through the station, waking systems that had slept since before Earth had oceans. Back on the ships, alarms flickered as power surged from the forge into human reactors. New data streamed into their consoles. Schematics for weapons they did not understand, drives faster than anything they had built, shields that bent space itself. Engineers stared at the displays in awe. This could change everything," one breathed. But the alien child shook its head. The forge awakens a beacon. The harvesters will know. They will come. As if on cue, long-range sensors screamed. At the edge of the nebula, dark signatures appeared. Dozens at first, then hundreds. The harvesters had found them. On the bridge, Jiro's hands tightened on the rail. We don't have time to build any of this. Myra's eyes blazed. We don't need time. We need one weapon, one shot, enough to hurt them again. Below, engineers raced to piece together a prototype from the forge's schematics. A cannon of compressed plasma wound with strange crystal coils. They mounted it on the Resolute's spine, cables running like veins into the ship's heart. Outside, the nebula boiled as harvester ships pushed through, their black hulls scattering lightning. The voice returned inside every mind, colder than before. You dig up old graves. We ate them too. Mira stood at the viewport, fists tight. Let them come. The Resolute turned, its new weapon glowing like a captured star. The rest of the fleet formed behind it, battered but steady. Pilots climbed back into their fighters, faces set. As the first harvester ships breached the clouds, the alien child whispered one last warning. If you fire the forge's heart, it may destroy you too. Myra's answer was quiet but firm. If that's the price, we pay it. Outside, the shadows spread their claws. Inside, the weapon reached full charge. And between the two forces hung a single moment of silence, the breath before a storm that could shatter the galaxy. The Resolute's hull hummed under the pressure of the new weapon. Lights flickered. The ship felt alive, like it was breathing the forge's power. Everyone on board knew this shot could change everything, or kill them all. Captain Mira Lane stood at the center of the bridge. Her crew waited for her order. Outside, the nebula boiled as harvester ships slid through the clouds like dark eels. Lightning flashed over their hulls. Their claws unfolded, reaching for the human fleet. Commander Jiro stared at the tactical map. First wave incoming. 30 ships. Myra's voice was steady. Hold fire until they're in range. Below decks, engineers clamped the last coils into place. The cannon's core pulsed brighter and brighter, casting blue light over their faces. One muttered a prayer. Another wiped grease from trembling hands. In the hangars, pilots sat in their fighters, engines warm. The alien child watched from a small window, silver eyes wide. They know what you built, it whispered. They will try to stop you before you fire. The first harvester beams cut across the void. Shields flared on the human ships, some failing instantly. A destroyer spun away trailing sparks. Fighters launched in swarms, weaving between dark claws, spraying plasma to buy seconds of time. Mira gripped the rail. Range. Closing now. Jiro shouted. Fire, Mira said. The forge cannon spoke. A single beam of white-blue fire tore from the Resolute's spine. It did not look like any human weapon. It was a stream of pure light wrapped in crystal arcs, bending space as it moved. It struck the lead harvester ship square in its mouth. For a heartbeat nothing happened. Then the ship erupted. Not like an explosion, more like a star collapsing inward. The dark hull folded, then shattered into shards of glowing dust. The shockwave rippled out, tearing two more harvester vessels apart. The voice in everyone's head screamed, a sound like stone grinding on stone. On the bridge, the crew gasped. It works, Jiro whispered. But the victory was brief. The other harvesters shifted, opening their mouths wider. Streams of dark energy poured toward the Resolute. The ship rocked under the impact. Alarms howled. Panels burst in showers of sparks. Shields failing, someone cried. Mira steadied herself. Recharge the cannon. All ships, focus fire on the flanks. Buy us time. The fleet obeyed. Fighters dove like angry insects, blasting at weak points, dragging swarms away from the Resolute. A carrier took a direct hit, splitting in two. Escape pods sprayed into space like seeds. The hospital ship hid behind debris, its medics still working without pause. Down in engineering, the cannon's coils glowed dangerously hot. 30 seconds, a technician shouted. Any more, and it melts through the hull. Do it, Mira said over comms. Give me that second shot. The alien child moved to her side. If you fire again, the forge's heart may die, it whispered. There will be no third shot. Mira looked at the child. One shot saved us. A second might save 1,000 worlds. We're not stopping. Outside, harvester ships closed in, beams clawing at the Resolute. Fighters fell back, their ranks thinning. The fleet's line bent under the assault. 10 seconds, engineering called. Myra's voice cut through the chaos. All ships, clear firing line. Now. The fleet peeled aside. The Resolute hung alone in the center, its cannon glowing like a newborn sun. Dark ships rushed at it, desperate to stop the shot. 3, 2. Jiro counted. Fire, Mira said. The cannon roared again. This time the beams split into 3 forks, each lancing into a different harvester. One imploded instantly. Another burned from within, its swarms dissolving like mist. The third recoiled but survived, its hull cracked and bleeding black light. But the forge's heart screamed. Energy surged back along the coils, shaking the Resolute from stem to stern. Gravity flickered. Bulkheads buckled. We're overloading, engineering shouted. We have to shut it down. Shut it down, Mira ordered. All power to shields. The beam cut off. The cannon went dark, smoke curling from its vents. But the gap it had made in the harvester lines yawned wide. Now, Mira said. All ships, break out. Engines flared across the fleet. Fighters swooped back to cover the retreat. The hospital ship limped after them. One by one the human vessels dove through the opening, plasma fire lighting their path. The alien child clung to a console, watching the black ships swirl. They are angry, it whispered. They will not forget. Mira looked out at the shadows closing behind them. Good, she said softly. Neither will we. The fleet burst out of the nebula, battered but alive. Behind them the forge station flickered, its core dimming. Symbols along its hull faded into darkness, as if the ancient machine had given its last breath. On the bridge, no one spoke. The weapon had worked, but the cost was clear. They had burned their only ancient advantage. The harvesters were wounded, not destroyed. And now they knew humanity could hurt them. Mira turned to Jiro. Get me every scrap of data from the forge. Schematics, power logs, everything. If we can build one cannon, we can build more. Jiro nodded, though his hands shook. They'll be hunting us. They already are, she said. The alien child stared at the starfield ahead. You have started a war, it murmured. A war the galaxy ran from long ago. Mira set her jaw. Then it's time someone finished it. Outside, the stars slid by, cold and endless. Somewhere in that darkness, the harvesters gathered again, larger than before. And on a single battered ship, humanity began to plan its next move. The human fleet drifted through deep space, battered and silent. Hulls were scorched. Engines burned weakly. Inside the Resolute, the air was heavy with metal and exhaustion. But Captain Mira Lane's eyes stayed hard. She had hurt the harvesters. Now she needed a way to end them. Commander Jiro studied a faint signal blinking on his console. This came from the forge data, he said. Coordinates to a world at the edge of the map. The records call it Epsilon 7. The alien child raised its head. I know that name. My ancestors fled there when the First War began. It is a grave world. Mira looked at the star chart. A grave might still hold weapons. Or answers. Set a course. The fleet limped across the void. Days passed in uneasy silence. Pilots patched their fighters with scrap. Engineers pulled double shifts to keep engines alive. In the med bay, Wounded soldiers stared at the ceiling, hearing the harvester's voice in nightmares. When Epsilon 7 appeared at last, it looked like a dying pearl, pale gray, streaked with black canyons. Thin clouds swirled around its equator. No lights glimmered on its surface. Scans showed structures, but no life. Planet of ghosts, Jiro muttered. Dropships descended through the thin atmosphere. Dust storms rose below. From orbit, the world looked empty. Up close, it was full of ruins, towers leaning like broken spears, roads buried in ash. Symbols like those on the forge were etched into the stones. Mira led the landing team herself. Soldiers stepped out onto cracked pavement. The alien child walked beside her, eyes wide with sorrow. "This was once our capital," it whispered. "Now, only echoes remain." Their footsteps echoed between hollow buildings. Inside, they found bones turned to dust and machines frozen in mid-movement. Halls of great palaces stood open to the wind. It felt as though the city had died in a single heartbeat. Jiro's voice crackled over the comms from orbit. "We're picking up a power source beneath you. Deep, under the central plaza." Mira nodded to her squad. "We go down." They found a stairway spiraling into darkness. The deeper they went, the colder it became. Symbols glowed faintly on the walls, guiding them like stars. The air smelled of stone and old smoke. At the bottom lay a chamber the size of a cathedral. In the center floated a crystal sphere cracked with age. Around it stood statues of tall figures holding blades of light. As Mira stepped closer, the sphere flickered. The alien child touched it. A ghostly image filled the room, not of a person, but of a battle. Shadows shaped like the harvesters swarmed across stars. Ships burned. Worlds cracked. Voices screamed in a language the humans could not understand. "This is what we faced," the child whispered. "My people built the forge, but it was not enough. We made one last weapon. Then the harvesters found us." Myra's throat tightened. "What weapon?" The sphere glowed brighter. Symbols formed in the air, a pattern of 3 worlds linked by energy lines. The child read it aloud. "A gate. A prison. A trap to hold the harvesters forever. But we lacked the power to finish it." Jiro's voice came again, urgent. "Captain, sensors are spiking. Something's moving under the surface. You need to get out now." Before Mira could answer, the ground trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling. From the far end of the chamber rose shapes of pure shadow. Not harvester ships, but fragments, like pieces of them left behind. They floated between the statues, eyes glimmering like ice. "They left sentries," the child breathed. "Shadows to guard their secret." The soldiers raised their weapons. Plasma fire hissed across the chamber, but the shadows absorbed it like smoke. They drifted closer, silent except for a low moan inside the humans' heads. Mira shouted over comms. "Pull the dropships to the plaza. We're coming up." Her team fell back toward the stairway, firing bursts to slow the sentries. The alien child clutched the sphere to its chest. The stairway shook as something massive moved below. The statues cracked and fell. On the surface, dust storms whipped across the plaza as the dropships landed. Pilots yelled for speed. Shadows burst from the stairway after the humans, stretching into claws and teeth. Soldiers fired from the ramps, their plasma bolts lighting the gray sky. Myra's team leapt aboard. Engines roared. The dropships clawed upward into the thin air, shadows rising like black smoke behind them but unable to leave the ground. In orbit, the Resolute's crew watched as the planet's surface began to crack. A pulse of dark energy spread across the ruins like a ripple on water. "They're waking up," Jiro whispered. Inside the dropship, the alien child held the sphere tightly. "This is the key," it said. "With this, you can finish the gate. But the harvesters will know. They will come." Mira looked out at the gray world below. "Let them," she said. "We'll be ready." The fleet turned its bows away from the planet of ghosts. In the silence of space, everyone felt the same cold truth. The next time they faced the harvesters, it would be for everything. And far behind them, deep under Epsilon 7, the shadows stirred and whispered to the dark between the stars. The human fleet drifted in the dark between stars. For the first time since leaving Earth, no one spoke of escape. They spoke of building. On every deck of every ship, engineers, soldiers and scientists worked side by side, drawing plans in the glow of the sphere they had taken from the planet of ghosts. Captain Mira Lane moved among them. Her uniform was scorched, her eyes ringed with exhaustion, but her voice stayed steady. "We have one chance," she said. "We finish what the ancients began." The alien child stood at the center of the war room, silver eyes reflecting the swirling diagrams. The sphere floated above its small hands, projecting 3 worlds linked by lines of light. "The gate must be built in 3 places at once," it whispered. "Only then will the harvesters be trapped." Commander Jiro stared at the map. "We don't have colonies there. We don't have fleets enough to guard them." Mira looked at him. "We'll make do. This isn't about strength. It's about will." Messages flashed out from the fleet to every human outpost, every station, every shipyard. The call went further, to alien colonies who had watched in silence. Some ignored it. But some answered. Freighters full of metal. Engineers from worlds that had once fought the harvesters. Volunteers who had lost everything. In weeks the fleet became an armada. 3 great structures began to rise in hidden corners of space, rings of steel and crystal, built from designs older than any race alive. Humans worked without sleep. They welded hull plates with plasma, anchored pylons into asteroids, linked cables miles long. They called the project the Waking Gate. On the Resolute's bridge, Jiro looked at the growing structures. "They're beautiful," he said softly. "They're not meant to be beautiful," Mira replied. "They're meant to be a cage." The alien child touched the console. "When the gate is complete, it will call the harvesters. They will come all at once. If even one escapes, they will rebuild." Mira nodded. "Then we make sure none escape." For the first time, the humans were not running. They were waiting. The day came when the 3 rings glowed with power. Energy from the forge's heart pulsed through their cores. The sphere cracked and went dark, its work finished. A silence spread through the armada, the silence before a storm. "They're coming," Jiro said quietly. At the edge of every sensor, black signatures appeared. Hundreds. Thousands. A tide of shadows crossing light years. The harvesters had heard the call. On every human ship, crews strapped in. Fighters lined up in bays, their pilots breathing slow, steady. Soldiers checked weapons they knew might not matter. Medics tied bandages over shaking hands. No one expected to survive. Everyone intended to fight. Mira stood at the front of the bridge, eyes on the stars. "Today," she said, "we stop running." The first harvester ships emerged from the dark like a black ocean. Their beams lit the void. Swarms poured out, claws reaching for the rings. "Hold fire," Mira ordered. "Let them come through." The harvesters poured into the trap, drawn to the shining gates. More and more until the darkness seemed endless. The rings trembled under the weight of so much energy. "Now," Mira whispered. The 3 gates flared. Beams of light linked them, forming a lattice around the invading fleet. Space itself twisted. The harvesters roared inside every mind, a sound of rage and hunger. Jiro's voice shook. "It's working." But the harvesters struck back, their beams slashing at the rings, trying to break the lattice before it sealed. Sections of the structure shattered. Volunteers died holding the pylons together. Fighters dove into swarms, exploding to buy seconds. On the Resolute, engineers screamed over comms. "We're losing the 3rd anchor." Myra's fists clenched. "Send the Resolute itself. We'll be the anchor." Jiro stared at her. "If we do that, we can't leave." Mira looked at the child. If we don't, no one leaves. The Resolute turned from the fleet and dove toward the failing anchor point. Plasma thrusters burned white. Enemy fire raked the hull. Bulkheads burst, but the ship kept moving. It slid into position and locked itself into the final gap of the gate. Power surged through its spine. Lights went out across its decks. It became part of the lattice. The alien child stood beside Mira, silent tears on its face. You will be trapped with them. Mira smiled faintly. Somebody has to hold the door. On the bridge, alarms blared. Jiro gave her a salute. It's been an honor, Captain. Myra's eyes stayed on the stars. Fire the gate. The rings blazed. Light arced through space, closing like a fist. The harvesters howled as the lattice tightened, crushing their ships inward, folding the shadows into a single point. Space shook. Stars bent. One by one the dark ships vanished, pulled screaming into the heart of the gate. Swarms dissolved. Beams flickered out. The void cleared. And then the gate sealed. A sphere of frozen light hung where the harvesters had been, a prison outside time. Silent. Still. Across the armada, stunned crews stared at the empty sky. The harvesters were gone. On the Resolute, power flickered. Systems failed. Mira stood at the viewport, watching the sphere. Her ship was trapped inside, locked with the enemy forever. But there was no enemy left, only darkness and silence. The alien child reached for her hand. You saved them, it whispered. Myra's eyes softened. No, she said. We saved them. Outside, the sphere drifted, a new star in the galaxy, a warning and a promise. And far away, on 100 worlds, people looked up at their skies and whispered a single name, humanity. Because when a plea for help had gone unanswered by every other race, the humans had answered. And in answering, they had shaken the stars.